Alright, so to close this section out, we're going to talk about the global carbon cycle. So we've actually kind of talked about half of it already, because I've shown you glucose getting broken down. And that's, one piece of half of it. But essentially what it is, carbon's either in the atmosphere as CO2, or plants have taken CO2 and they've used photosynthesis to make sugars and fats and oils out of it, and then it gets burned for energy by organisms and releases CO2 again. So there's a cycle here. And so what it looks like is, you've got your CO2 and your H2O, and plants are going to perform photosynthesis. And one day, people too, mark my words, I will solve all of world hunger until, it's a cloudy day. Photosynthesis, so this is like plants. And it's going to remove the CO2 and H2O. And what we get is oxygen. So plants release oxygen. And they get, they produce carbs, fats, oils, all the good stuff. Alright? And to do this, this is all, this is like stored energy right here. We've talked about that. But energy is like matter. It can't be created or destroyed. So where does it come from? Sunlight. So plants are like the first solar panels on the planet. They took sunlight and they made fuel out of it. And then what happens is respiration. So an animal comes along like me, I see a stalk of corn, and I'm like, give me that solar energy. Get over here. Yeah, you're not running away, stupid stalk of corn. And we eat it. And then we perform respiration, and we exhale CO2, and we produce water as well. And so plants will do this as well to get through the night, and animals will do this as well. So animals eat plants, and plants eat themselves. The sun's not always shining, so they got to get through. They got to get through a cloudy day. They got to get through the night. And so when we do this, we use the stored energy. Where does it go? Well, it gets released as, we'll call it metabolic energy. What do we do with that metabolic energy? Well, the most evolved form of life uses it to teach an online chemistry class. And then the next most uses it to learn from an online chemistry class. And then there's also like my dogs that use it to take a nap on the couch all day and then bark at a 7-Eleven cup. That's all metabolic energy. That's literally the only uses for it. That's all you can do. It's not just about like running or walking or jumping. No, it's about learning and barking. That's all you can do with it. And so what happens is we release the CO2, plants absorb it, it goes round and round. So this is the global carbon cycle. This isn't a totally closed loop though, because there can be external sources of CO2. So it can also get dumped in by burning fossil fuels. And so this whole system can tilt. This isn't like totally enclosed. This is not encapsulated. This is not the Martian. Okay, we're not in a little tent where it is like tightly controlled. There are other sources. There's a lot of carbon that's buried in the earth in forms of hydrocarbons. So they were living organisms, and then over time, heat and being buried and having pressure on them has caused them to slowly react into more generic, basic hydrocarbon forms. Long carbon chains, things like that. You get your diesel fuel, your gasoline, the stuff you make plastics out of, and also like a lot of methane gas, stuff like that comes out as well. So a lot of different hydrocarbons. But those all used to be like, plants and animals way back when, millions of years ago. And so that CO2 can get dumped in. But originally that CO2 actually left the system, and now we're bringing it back. And it turns out that there's some environmental consequences for that. A couple billion people can impact the environment of the earth. If you don't believe me, just see what 20 people do to a campground. It's not the same on a Monday as it was on a Friday. It's like a public one. Alright, so Photosynthesis, there's really only a little bit to add here. So it's done by plants, and so photosynthesis is what we call a anabolic process. That was a fail. Spelling fail. First one of the class, luckily. I definitely haven't made any other ones. We call this an anabolic process. And what that means is it builds larger / more complex molecules, and it uses energy to do that. So it uses energy to build stuff. Whereas respiration is a catabolic process. And so what that means is it breaks molecules apart for energy. It makes them into simpler molecules. And it releases energy. And the way I remember this is catabolic cats destroy everything in sight. And I'm not just talking about local bird populations, I'm talking about all of your favorite knickknacks on shelves, your couch, and also your emotional well-being. They just trash everything in sight. And so catabolic, they release it and they do it and they get very energetic. They do it for energy. So catabolic processes. Anabolic, I remember this because the first NBA player I ever heard testing positive for steroids was the skinniest guy in the entire National Basketball Association. His name was Somali Samaki. Or was it Samaki Somali? Something like that. Played for the Lakers, which I'm a Blazers fan, so of course they were cheating. They cheat always. And the guy couldn't even, it's like typical Laker, couldn't even use steroids, right? He wasn't even big. But he got caught using anabolic steroids. And so anabolic steroids help you build bigger muscles. They help you build mass. So I can only imagine, I think he would have been invisible if he wasn't using them. If Somali ever ends up in my class, welcome aboard, buddy. I'm sure you've grown as a person over the last 20 years, and I've got nothing to worry about. But anyway, yeah, so that's how I remember. Anabolic steroids build muscles, they build mass. And so these build, cats destroy, that's how I remember it. And yeah, I have a friend, me and him still joke around about good old Somali Samaki. So, yeah, I think he got bounced out of the NBA for it, which is kind of sad, but, maybe don't cheat. Don't be a Laker about it. I know there's always a Lakers fan in the class, and they are so mad right now, and they're probably like, oh, blah, 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 16 rings, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, whatever. Don't care. Blazers got one. It's more special. It's so special because we only have one. It's like you have 16 kids. Yeah, whatever. You start losing. You have one. Oh, that child is so precious. It's your everything. And so, have fun taking care of your 16 championship trophies. Alright, so that's it for this section. There's really nothing more to add here. We are going to build onto it more with ideas later, but this is kind of the introduction. This is the global carbon cycle, anabolic, catabolic processes, and we'll leave it there.